So a number of devotees have requested me to write a book, and I decided it's just not going to be possible for me to write a book, so I'm going to make an audio book, and maybe it can be transcribed later on, who knows. But I thought if I gave my life history, it would help people understand how I came to be, let's say, the black sheep whistleblower of the Krishna religion. So people wonder how I came to this position in the first place, and I don't think they really understand my history and really the history of ISKCON. So I'm kind of like an eyewitness to all this history, and I think it's important for people to realize what happened, because, as Madhvacharya says, those who understand history, the itihasa, they are eligible for liberation. So we need to know the history of how ISKCON came to be where it is now, and how I became, let's say, a thorn in the side of this current status quo of modern day ISKCON, or corporate ISKCON, or the institution known as ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So I wanted to start out with some of my early history, because I think that will show people how I had certain ideas that developed in my early history of being part of ISKCON and being associated with Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, and how that shaped my ideas for later on becoming a critic of the direction ISKCON was going in. So I wanted to start with my earliest history and just roughly or briefly go over that so we can get some perspective on how I came to be who I am now. So first of all, my first encounter with Krishna was actually in a hippie shop in Los Angeles. It was a shop that sold marijuana, paraphernalia, that type of thing. So they were called hippie shops in those days. So I went into one of these shops and I saw a picture on the wall, and it was actually Krishna with his hand up in the air, and there was a cow. He was like blessing a cow in this picture. And so I right away was attracted, and I asked the young lady running the shop, who is that? And she really had no idea. So I think possibly I had some previous connection to Krishna, because right away I saw this figure which seemed oddly familiar or important to me. So later on, I was driving down Sunset Boulevard, and I saw a small group of Hare Krishna devotees chanting on the side of the street. There was only maybe 20 people at the most, and there was women dressed in saris, men with shaved heads wearing robes, and I immediately stopped, and I didn't know what it was, honestly, but I did have this feeling that I was going to become part of this, whatever this was. So I just came up to these people and I says, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, we're the Hare Krishnas." And I says, "Whatever this is, I want to do this." That's what I told them right off the bat. And they said, "Well, come to our temple and you can find out more about it." So I went to the temple, which was on La Cienega Boulevard. It was a small house, really, and I was at the Sunday feast, and I asked this devotee named Kanu Priya how I could join the movement and become part of the Hare Krishnas, and he said, "Well, there's no room in this temple. If you want to move into a temple, you have to go to San Francisco." So I didn't realize this, but it was not really a representative of the temple. The temple really would not have told me to leave, but he was just acting as a sort of a spokesman for the temple. But anyway, it was a blessing in disguise, because then I drove to San Francisco to join there. But when I got there, it was even worse crowded temple situation, and they said, there's no room here. You'll have to sleep in your car. So that's what happened. I was sleeping in my car, and so were many other devotees. There was a lot of devotees sleeping in their cars. There was no room at the temple. It was a very small little storefront, had one little bathroom, and a small temple room. And this was 518 Frederick Street, San Francisco. That building is still existing as a laundromat today, so I go by there once in a while. It's like a sacred place for me. But anyway, there was a program going on in the temple, and Prabhupada was speaking in the temple. So I was very lucky, because if I had stayed in Los Angeles, I would not have come in contact with Prabhupada personally. But he was in the building speaking, but it was so crowded in the temple room that I couldn't get in. So I was leaning over the Dutch doors. There was a Dutch door, which is like a half a door. I was trying to hear Prabhupada, but there was no sound system at that time, so I couldn't really hear him. So I kind of walked across the street and just sat across the street from the temple, waiting for the program to end. And Prabhupada came out of the temple all of a sudden, and he started looking over at me, and he just kept turning his head and looking at me, and turning his head and looking at me. So I just feel like I connected with Prabhupada at that time. And I really thought, this person is going to be my guru, period, end of story. I just felt like I had some special connection, and it's very hard to describe, but I just felt, this is it. This is my eternal spiritual master. I just felt very connected to Prabhupada at that time. It was a very mystical experience for me personally. So I was very lucky that I was sent up there, because I was able to connect with Prabhupada, see Prabhupada for the first time. And some of the devotees who were there at the time were Madhavisa Swami and Jayananda and Narayan Vishwakarma and some other people like that. And we were having a big Harinam in San Francisco every day, and it was just a very blissful time. And Jayananda and me became friends, and I was helping build the Rath cart under his supervision. And I also helped him repair automobiles and things like that. And somehow or other I became designated as the kind of courier between the Berkeley Temple and the San Francisco Temple, and they would send me off in a car to deliver bags of groceries to the Berkeley Temple, and I would bring people back from the Berkeley Temple to San Francisco Temple. So that was kind of my original, let's say, service. Then one day in the temple, somebody, I think it was Madhavisa Swami, who made a big announcement. We need 25 volunteers to go to India. Prabhupada wants to build up the India program. Who wants to volunteer to go? And of course no one raised their hand. I was looking around, but I raised my hand. I says, I want to go. Okay, so that is what happened. I started getting myself together, getting my visa, and getting money for the flight to go to India. And that is what happened. I went to India. And when I got to India, Prabhupada was sitting in a room with the devotees who were there at the time. There was only a small group of us, maybe 25 people, something like that. It was a little band, and I came in, and it was a very informal atmosphere there. Prabhupada was acting sort of like the temple president or the temple commander, and he was asking people, what service are you going to do today, and things like that. It was a very kind of intimate situation with Prabhupada, and he was talking to us, and I was seeing how he was dealing with different things, and I got a lot of perspective on how Prabhupada deals with things. But there was not always a pleasing atmosphere going on there. Sometimes Prabhupada would have to chastise people and correct people, And he would say something like, if we can't get anybody to cook properly, I'll have to cook myself, stuff like that. So it was really kind of a roughshod operation going on there with the group that we had. One thing I noticed right away was that Tamal Krishna kept bothering Prabhupada regularly, all the time. He kept saying, Prabhupada, I want to take sannyas. And Prabhupada said, no, you have to give Madhuri a child, and she will have another person to put her affection onto. Give her a child. Once that's done, come back and let me know about it. Well, that didn't happen. Tamal just kept badgering and bugging Prabhupada over and over, just every day, same thing. Prabhupada, you have to give me sannyas. And I said, gosh, this guy is very motivated. He wants a position. So let's just say I didn't have a lot of confidence in some of these big leaders right out of the gate. I just didn't feel like they had the proper attitude with Prabhupada. Or let's just say I thought they were somewhat disrespecting of Prabhupada. Then I heard a very kind of odd story that Prabhupada had been locked up in a room in Los Angeles just before he came to India, and he was going to India to basically hide out from these leaders who were trying to take over the movement in the United States. And there were supposedly 4 swamis, or the early sannyasis that Prabhupada had made, who were trying to force Prabhupada to sign over ISKCON to them. And so now he was in India. And so then I kind of realized, wow, why is Prabhupada spending so much time in India now? After he had said he wanted to do everything in the West, he's spending all his time in India. And that kind of gave an explanation. He was trying to, back away from those leaders in the United States and kind of reformat and, reset things. Then I had heard that Kirtananda Swami, who was one of the early leaders, had a big falling out with Prabhupada over different issues. He didn't like the devotees dressing up in robes. He wanted the devotees to dress in suit and tie. And he had stolen Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita manuscript and tried to sell it to publishers, claiming it was his. In other words, Kirtananda was, let's say, another motivated person who was trying to, let's say, usurp Prabhupada's position and become, let's say, a self-authorized authority, an authority over Prabhupada who could override Prabhupada's ideas and instructions. So again, this made me very skeptical of the leadership. Why are these people so motivated that they're challenging Prabhupada's ideas and Prabhupada's process? So it was a good learning experience for me, because I was seeing more and more that these leaders have got problems. And the number one problem is they are motivated for position. So these were good lessons for me, because later on I felt they were just trying to take over Prabhupada's position, or trying to take over the leadership of ISKCON and the assets of ISKCON and take over ISKCON, which is what I believe they later on tried to do. Now, in case no one has noticed, there's many Prabhupada memory forums and videos and all kinds of things going on all over the place, which never, ever, ever ask me for my memories of Prabhupada or my opinion on anything. So I become kind of persona non grata even among the so-called Prabhupada disciples. And that is because my memory of Prabhupada and my understanding of Prabhupada does not coincide with their understanding. And for the most part, their understanding is that Prabhupada appointed successors, conditioned souls, as his successors. I simply do not believe he would do that. And I believe saying that Prabhupada wanted conditioned souls to be his successors is making it look like Prabhupada made a huge mistake. Why would he do that? So Anyway, my memories, my recollection of Prabhupada is that he was always opposed to conditioned souls posing as gurus. So one of the things that happened right away in India, even just a few days after I got there, we were invited to some yogi ashram, and Prabhupada was going to speak. But this yogi had a big table in front of his Vyasa seat. He had a giant seat, and people were coming up offering Marlboro cigarette packages to this guy. And golden lighters to light the Marlboro cigarettes. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, everybody in India is smoking beedis, so Marlboro cigarettes are obviously some very high-class item for a cigarette-smoking person. So these disciples were finding the best cigarettes they could find for their guru, who was obviously a cigarette-smoking man. So I thought, wow, what is going on with these people in India? I thought these people in India were spiritually advanced, and the first thing I find is they're offering cigarettes to their guru. So I didn't have a very high estimation of the spirituality of India, let's say, after seeing that right off the bat. Shortly after that, we were at another sadhu's location, and this sadhu was a silent yogi. He would not speak, and he hadn't spoken for 25 years, something like that. But he would write on a little chalkboard, bring me a cup of coffee, something like that. So he was writing things on this blackboard, and he, was giving his, let's say, information out through his disciples, and they were getting further prodding from little notes he was making on his blackboard. And after his presentation, it was time for Prabhupada to speak, and Prabhupada said, "This man is bogus. He is remaining silent, but when he wants something, he writes it on a blackboard. This is cheating. He's a big cheater. He wants this, wants that, wants the other. He's just like anyone else, except he's making pretend he's a big sadhu by being silent." And he just insulted this guy just to the quick. He just insulted this guy to an amazing percentage, and the guy became very angry, and he got off his seat and stomped away. And as he was stomping away, Prabhupada said, "See, now he's angry." He's getting upset, which means he's not, a self-realized person who is not affected by material things. He's very affected by my insulting activities here. So I said, wow, it's pretty intense. Prabhupada's right in the middle of this guy's program, and he's insulting the crap out of this guy. So I could see, Prabhupada was very bold, but Prabhupada did that on purpose. He wanted us to get the idea. Do not worship conditioned souls and fools as gurus. It's very misleading, and it will not liberate you from the material world. You will have to stay where these conditioned soul gurus are staying, which means you stay here in the samsara wheel. So there were other instances like this where Prabhupada was very insulting to all kinds of people. There was this Guru Maharaji guy, and Prabhupada said we urinate in his face. So things like that. Prabhupada had no patience for false gurus. Then later on we ended up in Mayapur, Sridham Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, and we were thinking, oh, this is wonderful, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, how nice. But there was obviously a lot of tension between Prabhupada and the God Brothers, who had established temples in Mayapur. There was many temples there already. Most of them were very small operations. Sridhar Maharaj, Madhav Maharaj, and similar other people, disciples of Ban Maharaj, like that. They were all there in their established programs, which were very small programs. And then we found out that Prabhupada had asked Sridhar Maharaj to donate some of his land to ISKCON, and Sridhar Maharaj had asked for a very huge jacked up price for the land. So Prabhupada said, we don't want to get anything from Sridhar now. He's just trying to cause us trouble. Now, one of the followers of Prabhupada was named Himavati. Himavati came back from Sridhar's temple. She was crying, and Prabhupada said, what happened? And she said, they're insulting you over there, and they don't like you. They're saying you're the guru of the hippies, and you can't make any brahmanas in India, stuff like that. So the Guy brothers were like not really in favor of what Prabhupada was doing. There was many other criticisms, that we had females in our party, and we were making females into pujaris who were offering to the deity, things like that. So the Guy brothers were against us on so many levels. And this kind of came to a head when 100 Gaudiya Math brahmacharis and sannyasis came over to our property, and we could see right away, just by the looks on their faces, they were not happy campers. They did not like Prabhupada, and Prabhupada offered his obeisances to all of them, and they did not offer their obeisances back. And then a small group of the main leaders, like Madhav Maharaj, came into Prabhupada's little shanty. We had a little shed there, like a little straw hut, really. And right away, this Madhav Maharaj started pointing his finger in Prabhupada's face, and he was yelling, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. So I couldn't understand what he was saying. It was all in Bengali or Hindi. But we did know they were not happy that Prabhupada was using the title of Prabhupada. So they were very, let's say, aggressive with Prabhupada. You know, you have no authority to use the title of Prabhupada. Well, Prabhupada told them that I am not calling myself Prabhupada. My disciples are calling me Prabhupada, and it's their job to give a title to their guru, and they've decided that's a title that I am worthy of. So what's the problem? And he's right. If we want to call Prabhupada Prabhupada, they have no authority to interfere with that or change that or oppose that. We gave plates of prasadam to these people, and they threw the prasadam on the ground, and they said, we can't eat food that's been made by malechas. So they started this whole thing, that we are malechas, and we're not worthy of giving them anything. Now later on, a few years after that, the same guys, they came back to Prabhupada and asked for a big donation. They said, can you donate money to our program? And Prabhupada says, I can't give you any malecha money. This is all from the malechas here. So, they were basically hypocrites with this whole thing. But now, after this whole incident, B.V. Puri, who was actually somewhat favorable to Prabhupada, or let's say more favorable to Prabhupada, he came up and explained the whole thing, that the Guy brothers were all having a big meeting about Prabhupada using the title of Prabhupada, and they were all opposing. They all agreed that he should not use that title. And one of the ringleaders in that group was called B.V. Narayan Maharaj. Now, B.V. Narayan Maharaj later on became the darling of Tamal Krishna and the ISKCON GBC gurus. But he had opposed Prabhupada using the title of Prabhupada. And they called him Swami Maharaj. And if you notice, that's it. That's the title they gave him. They all say Swami Maharaj. They do not call him Prabhupada. So this was like already brewing, let's say, right at the beginning. They didn't like what he was doing, and they were obviously envious that he was getting all of this glorification from us. And they didn't think he was worthy of that. And then we were in Madras. One of the Gaudiya Math leaders named Yati Maharaj wrote to the newspaper saying this Prabhupada is bogus because he has females in his party, and this was never done by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Prabhupada wrote back to the newspaper, and he said, every year Swami Yati Maharaj leads a big kirtan in Mayapur where thousands and thousands of widows are in the procession, and he is marching along with all of these widows. So he's a sannyasi who says we should never associate with women, but nobody associates with more women than this guy. So Prabhupada countered that. And the newspapers printed Prabhupada's rebuttal to this guy, which I thought was pretty spot on. Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to have women in the party, but Prabhupada knew in the West you're going to need women in the temples and in the program, because the West mixes up men and women everywhere. You're not going to be able to make a, let's say, celibate monk program with much success in the West. It's just not going to work. Plus, Prabhupada wanted householders. He wanted people who would have children and babies, and they would become future Vaishnavas for his society, and so on and so forth. So he had a plan which involved having women participating in his society, and this was simply forbidden by his godbrothers in the Gaudiya Math for such a long time, and one of the results was their movement was not able to spread widely because of these restrictions they had made. So Prabhupada had to adopt to the West, and he made different changes that were required to make Krishna consciousness work in the West, and his godbrothers never actually understood that, and they still don't, in my opinion. And the one thing we noticed was that these Gaudiya Math temples, many of them, most of them, were populated by a few old men, and there was hardly any, let's say, young or newer people there. So we asked Prabhupada what happened here, and he said they removed all of the devotees, and it was just a few old men posing as spiritual masters and leaders. And there's just a few old men living in these temples, and they're all fighting with each other over who gets which room and who has the key to the donation box, things like that. They've just made it into a business. He said they've made a deity showing business out of the Gaudiya Math. And he said we should make sure that does not happen to our ISKCON program. And another time we were going by a tea shop, and all these people were drinking tea, reading the newspaper, smoking bidis, and Prabhupada pointed over with his cane and he says, see, this is where many of my godbrothers ended up. They left the Gaudiya Math and they ended up smoking bidis, reading newspapers, drinking tea at the tea shop. So whatever you do, do not let ISKCON become like this. So he was warning us all the time, watch out, this Gaudiya Math, they created all kinds of problems because they made false gurus, and that had many subsequent bad reactions, which he said is inevitable when you make false gurus. You're going to have problems. Now, in the Gaudiya Math, devotees were banned, they were beaten, they were sued, and they were killed. And the same exact things started to happen in ISKCON after 1978. Devotees were banned, they were beaten, they were sued, and they were killed, and many children were molested. So the devotee citizens of the Gaudiya Math were not protected by the leaders of the Gaudiya Math, and the citizens of ISKCON were similarly not protected by the leaders. Very similar things happened, and Prabhupada told us that in the Gaudiya Math, some of the people who opposed the false guru was named Ananta Vasudeva, and those who dissented from Ananta Vasudeva got into trouble. They were banned. They were beaten. And Prabhupada says some of them were beaten so badly they died. Prabhupada says some of them had their heads crushed in with bricks, and some of them had their faces pushed into dog stools. All kinds of horrible things happened to dissenters. Then Sridhar Maharaj, who was the father of this whole operation, was asked about this by a newspaper reporter. Why are people being beaten and sued and killed? And Sridhar Maharaj said, well, haven't you read the Bhagavad Gita? People get killed all the time in the Bhagavad Gita. That's what happens. Oh, okay, so Sridhar Maharaj was authorized to make a program where devotees of Krishna are being banned, beaten, and killed, and sued, and mistreated. No, sorry. No one is authorized to mistreat Krishna's devotees, especially not to ban them, beat them, sue them, and kill them. That is not authorized. But the same thing happened in ISKCON. So not only did ISKCON duplicate these behaviors, these atrocities, but they went to the founder father of this program, Sridhar Maharaj, and made him their Shiksha Guru authority in 1978. They announced Sridhar Maharaj is our Shiksha Guru authority. He's the senior most Vaishnava on the planet. So the very same person who created all these problems in the Gaudiya Math became the big topmost advisor of ISKCON after 1978. And then we wonder why devotees were banned, beaten, sued, and killed. Well, the architect of all that became the consultant of ISKCON. So ISKCON leaders knew that. They knew because Prabhupada had told us all these very unfavorable events were going on in the Gaudiya Math. Do not go to Sridhar. Sridhar is the architect of all this stuff. But they went there because they wanted to duplicate his process. And they did. So, anyway, these are some of the observations that I made when I was in India, that the Gaudiya Math is largely a failed operation because they made false gurus. Therefore, we, under no circumstances, should follow in their footsteps because it will lead to degradation, devastation, and dismantling of the mission, which it has done for ISKCON. Anyway, this is just a start. These were my initial observations of various things that were going on in India, and I know people are more interested in what I have to say about post-1978, and we'll get to that after a while, but I wanted to lay the groundwork for how I came to certain ideas about how Prabhupada does things and how he is very discouraged by false gurus, and he did not want this to happen in his mission. I hope this helps. Stay tuned. We'll keep going. Hari Bol.